For more analysis, I'm joined by Sir Liam Fox, who served as UK Secretary of State for International Trade and former UK Secretary of Defence. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Sir Liam, the big question everyone's asking this week is a simple but serious one. Are we heading towards a US strike on Iran?
The answer is possibly, and I imagine the vagueness of the answer is exactly what the United States intends. I think it intends to keep the regime in Tehran guessing. There is international outrage at the way that the regime there has behaved in recent times, with estimates of over 30,000 civilians murdered by the security forces because of the protests against the regime. I think there's a widespread belief that they still intend to continue with their nuclear program, notwithstanding the attacks earlier last year on the nuclear facilities. And I think that there is huge international pressure that wants to see the people of Iran treated properly and humanely by their government.
And I read a recent report that reports the shocking daily cost just to keep the USS Abraham Lincoln sailing near Iran, which is $2.5 million per day. So my question to you is, would any government really absorb that type of cost if military action wasn't seriously being considered here? Or is it really credible to think that this is just a bluff?
Well, President Trump is not renowned for bluffing, but of course the cost of sailing and maintaining the aircraft carrier would be the same wherever it was in the world, not just a cost if it's deployed to the Gulf area. But I think it's sensible for the regime to be listening to what the American administration are saying, which is, we don't believe that you have acted in good faith over your nuclear program. We're appalled at the treatment of your civilian population, and we want you to come to the negotiating table and talk seriously. And I think that there is a sense that the regime in Tehran is the weakest it has been since the 1979 revolution, that there is no real religious authority in the government there, that it's being held in place by the torture, murder, and oppression of its own people, and that the time is rapidly coming when the people of Iran should choose themselves who they're governed by.
Now, let's talk a bit more about regime change, as you just mentioned. Is regime change in Iran something the West should actively want? And do you believe that a different leadership in Tehran would generally open Iran up to Western trade and investment? Because Iran is a high-risk partner, but it could eventually be a high rewarding one as well, right?
Yeah, so I think I counted about 5 questions in that one question. So the first thing is, do I think regime change would be good? Yes, I do. I think it would be good for the people of Iran primarily, but I think it would be good for the region if Iran's proxies were no longer trying to destabilize its neighbors. Number 2, do I think that we're going to see that transition? Well, it depends what you're going to transition to. It's all very well to change from a brutal and oppressive regime that we have at the moment, but what would it move into? If we think back to 1979, the protests against the Shah were very widespread and included secular liberals as well as religious people, Marxists, as well as nationalists. But the revolution was hijacked by Khomeini and his religious extremists. So you have to know that you're going to change to something better as well. And I think what the international community could be doing is to bring the very disparate groups of opposition who are scattered inside and outside Iran, but bring those together so that if their mullahs were to fall, that we would see an interim government, a transitional government that represented all the strands of opposition, because otherwise, first of all, you may get a government that comes into play based on the IRGC, which is little better than what we have today, or you might see a splintering politically inside Iran, or even a splintering geographically and neither of those would be good for the region or for the Iranian people. And ultimately, it's not for any foreign power to determine who governs Iran or what the system of government should be. The only people who have a moral right to determine who governs the people of Iran are the people of Iran themselves.
And Sir Liam, if the US were to take military action against Iran, do you think that the UK would inevitably be pulled in, either politically or militarily here?
Well, I certainly can't speak for the British government, but I do think that the international coalition have made very clear that they take their responsibilities to prevent Iran from having a nuclear program very seriously. Regime change as a policy aim wouldn't be consistent, I don't believe, with what the British government would believe was the implementation of international law. But I think that everybody would agree that a change in the regime would be good for the people of Iran, for Iran's neighbors, and for the wider region.
And President Trump also, we saw this in the headlines, he's warning that time is running out for Iran. Do you think that there can still be negotiations at this point?
I think there still can be. I think we've seen in other situations that if negotiations are entered into fully and honestly, that there can be a de-escalation. But we've also seen in the case of Venezuela what will happen if there isn't. So I think that we need to recognize that this is a regime held in place only now by its security forces with no public support whatsoever. And that another message that needs to go out is that those security forces, including the IRGC, who are keeping the regime in place against the wishes of the people of Iran, and who are using some of the most violent, oppressive tools to keep the people down, they will be held responsible for their crimes against the Iranian people if they continue to prop up a regime that has no popular support.
And what would your message be, Sir Liam, to Iran and the leaders now watching this escalation at this time as we see this military buildup in the Middle East?
Our message to them would be, your time is up. Let's try to make sure that we can transition to a peaceful Iran, to a stable and democratic Iran, where the people themselves choose their own future, and where Iran can open itself up, as you said right at the beginning, to its tremendous possibility, an open, outward-looking Iran that was friendly to foreign direct investment could utterly transform not just the lives of the people there, but the country's economy and the region as a whole. And it would be genuinely a win-win. And the only people standing in the way of that are the extreme theocratic leaders in Tehran at the present time.
And taking advantage that we have you with us today, let's talk a bit more broadly about the UK-US relationship, this special relationship that they always had. Is it still as meaningful as it once was, or has it fundamentally changed right now? Where does this relationship stand?
Well, the phrase special relationship was actually coined by Winston Churchill, and he did so as a wartime leader, recognizing that there was a relationship in terms of defense and particularly security and intelligence between the United States and the United Kingdom that was unparalleled. That is still true today. The intelligence relationship, the intelligence sharing between Washington and London is still unparalleled anywhere else. So that's part of the special relationship, is rock solid. Yes, there are occasional differences between governments in London and governments in Washington, but that relationship is too important and too strong to become the political property of either the Democrats or Republicans in America, or the Labour Party or Conservatives in London. And it's certainly too strong to be affected by the personal chemistry between leaders. So I think we recognize the importance of it, the strength of it, and we don't allow it to be undermined by any short-term political considerations one way or another.
Because there was one consideration this week, that was President Trump, or last week, President Trump initially suggested that British and allied NATO troops weren't really on the front line in Afghanistan, but later back down on these claims, calling British soldiers amongst the greatest of all warriors. So how would you respond to these claims?
I think it was right the second time.
Good and simple. Now, I'd also love your thoughts on the matter of NATO, Sir Liam. The Secretary General Mark Rutte said that Europe and its allies can't survive without the United States. Do you agree?
I do. I think that we are much stronger as an alliance together. I think it's been true for a long time that the European nations within NATO have not been pulling their weight in terms of defense spending. And when I was Defense Secretary back in 2010 and 11, I was at that time saying to our European partners, if you don't increase your defense spending, at some point you have to face the risk of an American president who will not allow Europe to ride on the coattails of the American taxpayers. And I think we've reached that point. And I think finally the penny has dropped across the European members of NATO that they need to be able to do much more themselves and not simply depend on the huge military strength of the United States. And remember, the United States military budget is bigger than the next 10 in the world all put together. It's tempting, and has been tempting for European powers to sit under that American umbrella. But I think that the patience has run out in America. Why American taxpayers should have to carry this huge bill while European countries spend their money on other projects such as their huge welfare bills. This time has been very predictable in coming. I hope now that the European countries really understand that they have to up their game and they have to do a lot more in defense of our own continent.
And Sir Liam, turning to China now, the UK Prime Minister, as you must know, Keir Starmer, is visiting Beijing, as did Mark Carney from Canada recently. So what message does this send to Washington? Do you think that China is the more reliable trade partner now as they pitch themselves to be in Davos?
No, I don't. And what I do think is that when we look at China, we have to take a balance between China as an economic opportunity and China as a security threat. Certainly there are economic opportunities in China, although they are somewhat limited. But on the security side, since we last had a British Prime Minister, who was Theresa May, visiting in 2018, what's happened on that security side? We've had China disregarding the treaty over Hong Kong with the United Kingdom and begging the question, what is a Chinese signature on a treaty worth? We've had the national security laws in China brought in, much more oppressive, and we've seen the security crackdown on the people in Hong Kong. We've had warnings in the United Kingdom from our own security services about the security threat that China poses daily to the United Kingdom. We've had continued saber rattling over Taiwan, and we've seen President Xi sacking some of his most senior military just in the last week. So I would say on that security side of the ledger, it's a negative picture.